Hi guys, how are you today? I'm super excited as per usual, but I'm really excited because, as you may or may have not noticed, I've been having a ton of fun doing all the Flosstube tags, and I know I still have quite a few to do. I've been going by the Flosstube original tag video playlist created by Heather Stitches, and she recently added some more. They're not necessarily new, there's just as she finds them she adds them on, so I know I have a few to do, but I was having so much fun I decided to make my own tag. So I've decided to call it the Fun Little Tag, just because I wanted a fun name, and I think the questions are pretty unique. I've done quite a few of the tags. I have a list of a lot of the tags I haven't done and their questions, but since there are some tags that I didn't know of before, there might be some repeats, but I don't think there are. So yeah, I really hope you answer these questions. If you do, it would be really awesome if you just left me a comment down below. I am subscribed to quite a few people, but honestly our community is so large, which is fantastic, but it's hard to be subscribed to everybody, and I obviously want anybody who wants to do this tag. So if you could just leave a comment, I can go check out your channel and your videos and your answers to my tag. Also, if you are not a video making person but you'd still like to answer the questions, you can totally just type out the answers and leave them in a comment down below. So I would still love to hear what you have to say. And yeah, just let me know if you've done the tag so I can go check your answers out. As far as the questions, the way I'm going to do the video is literally just ask the questions and answer them, but to make it easier, I'm going to include all the typed out questions in the down bar or comment box below so that you can easily read them, access them, etc. So here we go. Okay guys, so please don't mind if I look down at my phone. I just kind of emailed my questions to myself so that I could read them and ask them and answer them, etc. So my first question is, how do you arrange the floss that you're using on a project? So for me that kind of varies, but my most common way of doing it is kind of like having one of these cards. So this one actually came with a kit. This came with a Janlin kit, and it had some numbers, but what I ended up doing is just writing in the names there of the colors, depending on what the colors are, how different they are, etc. I might just draw out the symbols, so it's really easy to find. And a lot of times the floss just comes stuck in. I like looping it like this so it doesn't roll around in there. And a lot of kids either come with the floss already sorted on one of these cards, or they have the card and you sort it yourself. If it doesn't come with a card at all and it just comes with like a bundle of floss, I usually make one out of a cardboard or cardstock. I've even used a paper plate before and just punch some holes and do the same thing. With dimensions, I know they come kind of like the card comes bent and the floss is like in between the two ends of the card and it's glued in. Usually what I'll do is that'll be sticking out the bottom, so I just punch a hole right above the number of the color so that when I'm done using the floss, if I haven't used all 6 strands, I can do the same thing right above where the others are just kind of hanging down, glued in. So that's my most common method. It's worked so far for me. I've also done this with patterns that I've kitted up myself. I actually have a full set of DMC, and each color is on its own bobbin, so I put these together. I know they sell some different sizes of these rings. I think this is either the small or the medium, so I could use bigger ones for other projects. I'm also interested in the thread sorter. It's like a big plastic contraption that kind of is the same idea as this. You can sort up to 50 colors on it, and I'm really interested for when I do larger projects with lots of colors. Right now the Heaven and Earth design I'm working on only has 14 colors because it's monochromatic, so I actually have all of the colors on a ring like this. But once I get into like a fully colored design where you've got 70, 80, 90, even 100 plus colors, I would need like 4 or 5 of these, and that might not work, so I might go for the thread sorter idea. I know Teresa Little Stitcher showed hers in either a tag she did or something, but yeah, so sorry, puffy hair. But yeah, it's something I'm definitely interested in using. Okay, number 2. Have you attempted to dye fabric? If so, what method or methods did you use? If not, is there any particular method you want to try? So I know of 3 methods of dyeing fabric. There may be more. I know there's the ice dyeing method. I know there's the traditional immersing your fabric in a tub of diluted dye method. And I saw a really interesting Instagram post of a person who just basically laid their fabric out flat and took a spray bottle full of water, sprayed down their fabric, and actually blotted tissue paper onto the fabric and dyed it that way, and I thought that was so cool. So I might try that one because that sounds the most interesting to me, and then try the others. But I would be interested in tying all of them and see how they come out. So yeah. Number 3, if you use a needle threader, is there any specific type you prefer? So I have mentioned before that I am a floss licker, but that doesn't always work. I don't obviously lick certain flosses. I don't really lick my silks or my metallics. I use a needle threader for those. And even some cottons, I do use a needle threader when I'm using a size 28 needle, because even by licking the floss and trying to just insert it with my hand through the eye doesn't always work. So to save the hassle, I just use a needle threader. And I actually use these cheapo aluminum ones that you get with the sewing kits. Kind of has the little wire. Here, I'll use the card so you can see it there. Yeah, so it's got this little wire, you put that through the needle and it goes right in there. So the only thing with these is they are cheapo aluminum ones, so they tend to break quite easily. My solution was, honestly, I went on Amazon, I bought a pack of 100 of these for like $2, but I'm really interested in trying other threaders that kind of have the same concept with the little wire, but that's just a little bit sturdier. So I wanted to hear what your suggestions were. One thing I do want to mention, one I'm really happy with, is this micro needle threader. This is by the Puffin Company, and look at how tiny that is. It is so cool and so small. You can really get that into a beading needle quite easily. It makes it so easy to thread those beading needles, and I know some people just use a size 28 needles, but that doesn't always work with certain beads. If the hole is too small, it still doesn't go in. And even though I can kind of squeeze the wire on these, it just doesn't always work, and after like 3 or 4 threads it kind of breaks apart, because you can only get, even by squeezing it, you can only get the tiny tip of this in there, so it's a little bit hard to pull it out without causing too much pressure in this part where the wire is held. So it just breaks. So that's why I really like this, and I definitely recommend it, and I will include a link for where I purchased it down below. But I am interested to hear what other threaders you use of this kind of variety for your regular threading purposes. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Number 4. If you use any type of frame to stitch, do you stitch with the fabric over the frame or in the well? So what I'm talking about here is, and this works with a hoop or Q-snap or a scroll frame or millennium frame, you can either put the fabric kind of like over the bars or underneath the bars. So this is my stitching part. I actually am stitching mostly in the well, and I know some people stitch this way. I started stitching this way because I thought it would be more easily accessible, but it really isn't complicated to stitch this way. And there's a few advantages. Because you have this kind of barrier, it kind of prevents stuff from directly touching your fabric a little bit more. If you happen to set it down, your fabric is not directly on your surface. If you set it down on this side, it's the back of your fabric that's touching your surface. So as long as there's nothing liquid or that could stain your project that you wouldn't want on the front or the back, it's really not a problem if a little dust gets on the back, even though we try to prevent that. Also, it makes it a lot easier to start and end your threads, especially if you do the method where you kind of bury your threads under other existing stitches. So for example, here you can see sort of that pink going through those green and blue stitches. That's because I start and end by burying it in there, and it makes it easy to do that because the surface is closer to you, I guess. And also it makes it easier to do it whether you're here or in the middle. If you do it this way, ending your threads when you're like on this end or this end is a pain. So stitching in the well definitely has some advantages. I do it for most of my projects. The only one I haven't done it on is my Heaven and Earth, which is kind of hanging out on my floor stand, and I just find it easier for the fabric to be over the frame. So that's the only one that I don't really have in the well, but for the most part I do stitch in the well. Next question. I'm sorry, these are bulleted and not numbered, so I might lose count. Do you start your threads in the front or the back of your projects? What methods do you use? So I mentioned I usually just bury my thread under existing stitches. If it's the very first one, I kind of leave a little tail and I stitch over it, and that'll be my very first, and then from there I can bury. On my Heaven and Earth, I'm using only one strand. I'm actually starting from the front, so I take my floss and I tie a knot and I stick it through the front, and I go kind of over the back and start stitching over the front. So when I'm done with like the 10 by 10 block or 20 by 20 block, whatever it happens to be, that strand is secured, I can cut the knot and I'm good to go. I'm also interested in using the loop method. I used it once, but I haven't used it a lot because I don't know, I just haven't had that many projects where it works. But I do think when I do another large full coverage design where I would be using 2 threads instead of 1, I use the loop method because it looks like it saves a lot of time, and I definitely like starting those kind of projects from the front. Little projects like the one I just showed you, I really, especially because I hold it in hand, I just turn around and it makes it easier for me. But projects that are on a frame and that are full coverage, I definitely like using something where I can start from the front. Ending threads though, even on my Heaven and Earth, I prefer ending in the back if I can. I don't know why, I just like ending threads in the back. Alright, next question. If you are a gritter, what is your preferred method of gridding? So I do like gridding my projects. I know some people really don't care for it. Some people even call it cheating, which I think is kind of silly because there's still so much work that goes into these projects. Having grids is fantastic. I mean, the grids are on the pattern, so I see no problem adding them to my fabric as well. I've used 3 methods. I've used the nylon thread, kind of like the Easy Guide nylon thread. I've also used fishing line, which if you get the right size, it's pretty much the same thing. I've used thread. I've used the Sulky Sliver as well as the Gutterman metallic thread, and I've used the water soluble pen. So I think all of them have advantages and disadvantages. The thread can be a little bit frustrating, but for the most part, I have no problem with it. The only time I've had any issue with it is when I was gridding my 28 count Lugana fabric. I don't know why, but it was so frustrating. I don't know if it was the color of the fabric, I don't know if I was just tired, but I just couldn't get it. I kept miscounting, and the way I grid, when I grid like that, is when I grid using any type of thread, it looks like this. So basically I go over 10, under 10, over 10, under 10, or over 20, under 20 if it's something where I'm stitching over 2. And with Ada, I have no problem. This is a fishing line. But with the Lugana, I kept miscounting. So I know some people do like 6 over, and then like I guess they do 6 over, 4 under, 6 over, 4 under, and instead of getting these lines on the fabric, you get little X's, and it ends up being the corners of the boxes. Maybe that would work. I don't know. If you have any suggestions for me gridding on anything that's like 28 count or higher, let me know. But I definitely am a gridder, and I think it's worth it. And I just wanted to show you, this is when I do grid with the water soluble pen, it's just easier to make the full grid instead of going, you know, making a line and then another line and then a line and then another line. So that, if I use water soluble, I just make a full grid. But if I'm using thread, whether it's nylon thread or like a Sulky Sliver or Gutterman metallic, I grid like that. So yeah, so that is what I do. I think it's definitely worth it. Anything that's large, I mean large, the one I just showed you is like 7 by 8, or it's not quite 8 by 8, but it's not 8 by 10. It's like 8 by 7 or 8 by 7.5. It's a weird size. But yeah, so I have used gridding anything large. I like to use it. This one that I just showed you is actually only 5 by 7, but still I find it useful to grid. If it's a small design or something like this where it's really kind of easy for me to see where I am, I won't grid it. But I really do like gridding. I think it's definitely something that's worth it to do, and it ends up being really helpful in the end. Okay, so my next question is, what is your favorite way or ways to finish projects? I know some people have asked like, how do you finish your projects? But I want to know like your favorite way. Do you like making frames out, like framing your projects? Do you like making a wall hanging? Do you like making a pillow or cushion? Do you like making like a no-sew cube or something else? I want to know. Honestly, the only way I've really finished my projects is framing. I've made some ornaments, but they're meant to be ornaments, so I don't know if that really counts as a finishing method. I guess it does, but I want to try more stuff. I want to know what you like to do. But that one, I don't really have a particular answer because I haven't tried too much stuff. So I just want to know, what is your favorite way to finish your projects? Okay, what was your first cross-stitching milestone? So I have to say my first milestone was pretty much completing my first project that I bought. It wasn't the first one I finished, but I decided I wanted to cross-stitch when I was at Walmart at like the craft section, and I saw a Bucilla kit. It was like $5.50, $5.70. It was less than $6, and it looked small. It was 5 by 7. I'm like, all right, this is it. I'm gonna do it. And I opened it, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on here. There was back stitching, there was 3/4 stitches, there was 1/4 stitches, there was couching and French knots. And I was like, okay. So I felt really accomplished when I finished that. It felt like a really great milestone. Within that though, I have to say the French knots was the biggest thing. They were challenging. I had to practice them a lot. I practiced them. I thought I'd had them. I went to do it on the project and I messed up anyway. It just looked really weird. It kind of looked like a knot with a tail sticking out of it, and it didn't look right. It wasn't centered, and it took a little while, and now I feel like I can do them well and I can do them consistently well. But I think that was like my first milestone that I was like, all right, I'm happy with that. I'm excited about that. So yeah, next question, what is a stitch goal that you have, something you want to conquer, or another milestone you want to reach? I have to say for me that would be doing more specialty stitches. I have tried some, like I mentioned, I like the 3/4 and 1/4 stitches, back stitching, which is, I don't even know if that's considered specialty anymore because it's so common in our projects. But I know, like, I've done the couching, the French knots, I've done satin stitch and lazy daisy, but I know there's a whole lot more, and more that are actually really more complex. So I'm really interested in doing that. And I think the way I'm going to go about it is by doing the Twisted Band Sampler by Northern Expressions. And I think I'm going to do like the Twisted Rainbow Sampler first and do that in cross stitch version only. So I just got used to like the design and the transition of the colors, working diagonally, that sort of thing, and then going ahead and doing the Twisted Band Sampler with the specialty stitches and all. So that is the next thing I really want to accomplish, which, by the way, when you answer, it doesn't have to be a type of stitch. It could be if you wanted to, but it could be just like a certain type of project or a piece that you want to finish or something like that. So just let me know. All right, the next question is, what is your silliest like duh stitch moment? So for me, that is definitely the third kit I ever did came with floss. The first 2 kits I did came with yarn, so it was just one strand and you just use it as a cane and you're good to go. So naturally, when I got my third kit, I just assumed that's how cross stitching worked. So I took the 6 strands, I didn't even think of separating them. I started stitching and I was like, this doesn't look right. It's too thick. It just, the fabric is getting like bunched up. You can't even tell it's an X. It just looks like thread just like on there, and I was running out of floss, of course, and I was like, this kit didn't even come with enough thread. Like, what is this? And then I don't know if I just went back and read the directions, or I don't know what I did, but I figured out that you needed to separate the strands, and I was like, oh, right. So I felt really silly about that. So yeah, that was my silliest moment to date. So my next question is, if you use a paper chart, do you print them at home or do you use some sort of service? I tried printing one chart at home. If it's one page, it's not a big deal, but I started printing out my Heaven and Earth design, and it guzzled up that ink. So I'm thinking of maybe sending it out, especially if you're in the US. Is there any particular service that's good for this? Even wherever you are, of course, I want to hear your answer, but if you have any tips for the US of where I can send them out where it's inexpensive to do so. I mean, even if it's a little pricey, it might be more worth it than continuing to buy ink, to buy ink for my printer over and over and over. But I'm a paper chart person, so I really like having them printed out. And printing large charts out at home isn't going to work out. It's just going to use the ink too fast. So I wanted to know if you do print them at home and it works out better for you that way, or if you actually send them out for a service. All right, the next one is, how do you mark off your paper charts if you use paper charts, obviously. I've used the highlighter thing, but I find it in certain charts, it kind of starts diluting the ink and it just gets gross. It makes the highlighter gross. I've had that even happen with colored pencils where it starts kind of like not necessarily like diluting it as much as a highlighter, because highlighters are liquid, but it starts kind of diffusing it, and it just makes the paper chart really messy. And I don't know, I think my best one has been using a pencil, especially if it's a chart that I want to keep, which I don't do a lot. I don't really make working copies. I just mark off the chart that I'm provided with, because I'm not going to use it again, and most of my patterns I've bought digitally, so I just print them out. I do have some patterns I've gotten online, so I don't know, maybe I will make a working chart for those, because they come in like a nice booklet, so that I would feel a little bit weird not making a working copy. But if it's just like paper that comes in a kit, I usually just mark that out right off. So I'm curious how you mark them off and what method works best for you without making a big mess of the whole thing. Alright, the next question is there a cross-stitch book you suggest? And I really do mean book. I know there's a lot of wonderful magazines out there, but I really want to up my book collection. So I have one recommendation myself, and I do have a request. I know the Bewitching Cross-Stitch book by Joan Elliott is fantastic, and it's wonderful. And if you want to recommend it, because I know there are other people out there who might not know about it, totally go for it. But if you have a second book you like, or something, an honorable mention you want to make, I'd really love to hear it, because I do have that book, and it is amazing, and I definitely want you to recommend it if that's your choice. But I'd like to hear something else as well, just so that I can up my book collection. So the one I recommend is called The Cross Stitcher's Bible. It is by Jane Greenough, and I believe it was published in the UK originally. I don't know if this was ever published in the US. I just know that I purchased it online. So it is a UK copy, because it only has the price in pounds, and the original price was £17.99, so 18 pounds, which is about $28 US. And I got this for like $5 online. The actual book itself was only 78 cents, but the shipping was like $4. But $5 is not that bad. So this is what the book looks like. It's really cool. It's got a great introduction. It talks about floss, it talks about the needles, it talks about fabric. But my favorite part is the stitch library. Oh, is that a pattern? Oh no, good, it's not a pattern. It's just a mock-up of something. So it's the stitch library. Let me see if I can. There's kind of a table of contents within the book of what stitches are shown. And I'm sorry if that was not zoomed, if it was blurry or not. There we go. I think that's not so blurry. And there's a lot of stitches. And it's awesome, because when you turn to a page, it's a pattern. Sorry, there's also patterns like, okay, for example, the half road stitch with bar, or the road stitch. So it talks about the stitch, it shows you a diagram of the stitch, within this writing it talks about how you make the stitch, and it shows you what the stitch looks like used in a project. So it is awesome. I actually heard Stitching May mention this, and that she got her book for like $1 at a thrift store, which is amazing. But again, I got it for $5, so it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't know if you'll be able to find it at a bookstore, but you'll probably be able to get it online somewhere. And Carolyn, by the way, I agree with you. I took off the dust cover, and the picture is the same, and I love that. I don't like the block covers either. It's kind of boring, and I just like it because if this dust cover gets really messy or gross, I can just take it off and not worry about it, and the bottom of the actual cover of the book is still the picture. So yay for that. All right, we're almost done here, guys. So number 14. Oh, that's odd. It numbered half of my questions. Okay. Number 14, is there anything that you find you're very nitpicky about when you cross stitch? So I'm really nitpicky about floss usage. I think it's because I heard so many people mentioning that you can so easily run out of floss when you're using kits. I've never had that happen, and I don't know if it's because I always use till I just have the tiniest bit of floss left. And I even do that when I provide my own floss. The only time I've kind of had to get over that is with my Heaven and Earth, because I am trying parking, and sometimes, I'll stretch the floss pretty far. I still don't stretch it out more than maybe a 20 by 20 box, which isn't that much when you're working on 25 count fabric. But my dogs are making noises. What can we do? I'm just so nitpicky about it. I freak out about running out of floss, especially with kits that don't come with DMC floss, because I could just cut some more out of my own personal DMC. But if it's just like Dimensions or MCG's textiles, or some Busilla kits come with DMC, some don't. So yeah, I'm like, I don't want to run out, and then I have to write them, and I know they usually, everybody said they send them some, but I don't want to have to wait to get it, and I don't know. So I'm very nitpicky about floss usage, and I try to use it so there's the tiniest amount left. And I've found that I've actually have a ton of leftover floss sometimes with kids, so I wonder if some people just don't use it as sparingly as I do. I don't know. But I'm just curious if there's anything you're nitpicky about. Number 15. What is your favorite LNS you've visited while on a trip, if you've been to one? So again, this could be something that's kind of close to you. It doesn't have to be like a super long road trip that you did, just an LNS that you visited that's not like your LNS. For me, if you haven't seen my previous video, I will let you know. As of now, it's the Needlebug in Alabama. My goodness, that wasn't even a cross-stitch store. It was a needlepoint store. But that store had so much floss. It was incredible. I mean, they had other things. They had some stands, they had some fabric, they had a great section with a lovely selection of scissors. There's a lot of scissors there. They had your other essentials like Thread Heaven and that sort of thing. But the amount of floss in that store was, I mean, it was crazy. It was like, it looked like a warehouse. I loved it. It was amazing. I will link that video down below because I took a couple clips while at the store, and it was awesome. Okay guys, last question, number 16. Is there anything you do that you feel takes up a lot of time when you cross stitch, but is worth it in the end? For me, that definitely has to be gridding, and I'm gonna go back to that. It does take a lot of time. Sometimes I feel it goes by fast, sometimes I feel like it takes forever, and I start getting annoyed with it. But as I'm stitching and I run into like, oh, I have to skip over here and I want to work on this area and I'm not sure where the stitch goes, I'm so happy that I did it. I think it's extremely worth it, even if it gets annoying and frustrating and is hard to do. So yeah, that is the fun little tag, you guys. I hope you enjoy the questions. I can't wait to hear your answers. Please let me know in a comment if you've answered the questions so I can check your video out. And as my dogs are making noises, I will sign off for the day and talk to you soon. Bye!